Hey, this week's video is all about building a website. Now, as you can see today, I'm sitting in the almost sunshine in the park, but a few weeks ago I was tearing my hair out building my website in lockdown. Now, as it happens, I've built a lot of websites before, so I know the nuts and bolts, but I'm going to give you a real how-to video as to how to build and design your website. I'm also going to start talking about things like search engine optimization, and I'm going to be talking about hosting and design. Now, I had challenges 15 weeks ago, whatever it is, because I couldn't go out and take photos, but I had all sorts of other things as well. And as you can probably hear, someone behind me is having a party, so I'm going to go and join them, and I hope you enjoy this video. Hello and welcome to week 4. Okay, so this week I get to talk all about building my website. So I'm going to sort of dive into that now. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that you watch the video all the way through, because website design, search engine optimization, hosting, keywords, all of that, some of the things I'm going to say won't actually make sense till the end, even though I'm saying them at the beginning. So watch the video all the way through. So it's week 4. I'm getting myself a little bit more organized, as you can see. I've borrowed a microphone from a friend, which is actually great because it means I don't have to wear my old little lapel mic so much, which is fabulous, which I think means I can talk to you much better. Okay, so this week, brainybiscuit.com, I started to build my website proper. Now, a couple of things. The first thing is I've written all of my text. As I mentioned last week, I've identified Betty, this character that I particularly want to talk to, which is you guys, really. And I've designed my website to go with what I think that she will want or like. So I've written the text for Betty, and I've pretty much written what I want to say, the call to action that I want Betty to do, etc. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but because I actually have a web designer, because I have another business, it's easy for me. But one of the things you need to be as sure as you can about before you go anywhere is that your images, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also the text for your website is as clean and precise and as much as you want it before you head on into this project. Otherwise, it's going to start to cost you a fortune really quickly, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The other thing that I've struggled with this week, even though we've had some lovely weather, is photos, because of course it's lockdown and I'm stuck inside most of the time. So I'm going to have to use images that I wouldn't normally have used for this particular website. There are some lovely images of me in Ibiza, and I have managed to take some images in the local park with a friend. So you will see me and my hairstyles change on my website. And as somebody commented, I've got more hairstyles than Hillary Clinton. So that's why when we finish lockdown, please God that we do, then yes, I'll probably change some of the images on the website. So that's where I'm at. So here we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of building a website. Now, the first thing is the domain name. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you will know that I've had brainybiscuit.com for a while. It's a story that goes way back to my sales training days when I had a sales training company. So I've had Brainy Biscuit for a while, but you will need a domain name. You'll need a name for your website. Now, here's a couple of points for you. The first thing is brainybiscuit.com is a great name, but it doesn't help me in some ways when building my website following, because it doesn't actually tell you anything about what I do in the name. In the unique reference locator. So the website name doesn't actually tell you what I do. I just happen to like it and know what I'm doing with regard to websites. So if you're going to go and buy a domain name, I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute. I would suggest, if you have a product or a service that you really, really want Google to find, and again, I'll come back to that in a minute, that you try and put that name or those words into the business name when you buy the domain name. So, for example, if you are a sock manufacturer and you want to sell smelly socks, instead of having toasty toes, or Socks Are Us, if you're selling smelly socks, if you could get smellysocks.com, that's actually going to help, because if people are looking for smelly socks, that's the words they're going to put into Google. I'm assuming they smell nice, by the way. That's the words they're going to put into Google. And if that's in your domain name, if that's in your unique reference locator, the websitey name bit, then it will help people find you. So just to recap that little bit, if you have a product or service, you can call, if you can find that name, that website domain name, and use that, that's going to be a great help. Now, this does not have to be your business name. So your business could be called Ted's Terrible Trucks, and you could actually get a website that says largetrucksareus.com, because that's what you're selling. But your business is still Ted's Terrible Trucks, but you're selling large trucks. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Your business name doesn't have to be your website name. And if it's particular products or service, I would actually strongly recommend against that, unless it's a brand name, like Hoover or Cadbury's, for example, because people would look for those. So go and buy a domain name, go and buy a website name. Now, I had Brainy Biscuit for a very, very long time. If I had been buying this name to set this business up now because I want to talk to midlife ladies, I want to talk about confidence, I want to talk about business, I would probably have chosen a different name. But I like Brainy Biscuit, and I happen to know what I'm doing in this part. Other bits, not so much. So I'm going to stick with brainybiscuit.com. Now, where did I buy my name from? I personally went to GoDaddy and bought the domain name. If you go, there's lots of other suppliers, but if you go to GoDaddy and put in on the first page, go look at GoDaddy.com, go to the first page, you'll actually see a box, and you can type in search terms. You can type in the names that you want to use. So yes, let's put smelly socks, smellysocks.com. Let's put smelly socks in there. If it's an available name, they will let you know, and they will also let you know how much that is going to cost. Now, so you put in smellysocks.com, you go, yippee, I can have that domain name. And then there's a registration and buying process, which I will come to in just a moment. So the other thing to bear in mind is that I would always go for a .com URL. Now, the reason for this is that it is the most easily recognised, and Google really, really likes it. Now, if you are never, ever going to sell anything other than in the UK, you could go for smellysocks.co.uk. Or if you're only ever going to sell in Germany, you have smellysocks.de. If you think that you might have any global ambitions, or alternatively, that there may be competitors in your market, I would also buy the .co.uk, the .de, the .fr, wherever you think the competition might be, or wherever you think you might be selling your product or service. So, for example, brainybiscuit.com is a worldwide URL, but brainybiscuit.co.uk is a UK-centric one, and somebody comes along and they say, that's a really great idea, I'm actually going to sell biscuits, and I'm going to call them Brainy Biscuits, and I'm going to buy brainybiscuits.co.uk. That means that when you guys search for me, you could actually head up and get a biscuit company on .co.uk rather than me on .com. So if you are not worried about competition and you're not going to sell worldwide, then just buy the URL of your dreams. If, however, you have any ambitions to make this bigger, or you think that there might be threats or somebody might enter into your space, then buy the URL for the alternative. So buy the .com, it's the strongest one to buy if you can afford it and it's available for you. And then also buy .co.uk with the same name. Domains don't cost a huge amount of money, and it's a way of protecting yourself going forward. Okay, so go on to GoDaddy. They are as good as anybody. I use them an awful lot. I'll come back to that. Put in smellysocks.com. Yippee, it's available, as is smellysocks.co.uk. It will then give you a price for that domain name. Now, that price is that price, but there are a couple of tricks that you need to know. They will quote you a price based on the fact that you're probably going to buy 3 years up front. The first year may well be 99p, 99 cents, depending where you log in. But then year 2 and 3 might be 10.99 respectively. And they're saying that in order to get that one for the first year for 99p, you have to buy 3 years. So, that's actually going to be £21 approximately. So just be aware of that. You can buy a domain for a year and it's not going to cost you a fortune. But again, if this is your side hustle or it's something that you're just starting with, you could buy the domain name just for a year. You can renew it. They send you renewal notices in plenty of time. So just be aware of the fact that they actually price it that way. They will then offer you all sorts of services that you may feel you want to take up. I would suggest not. One of the things that they will push, which is really valuable, but we'll do it a different way, people, is an email address. So if you've bought smellysocks.com, you obviously want admin@smellysocks.com, email me at smellysocks.com. I don't know, great godsock@smellydocs.com. Don't do any of that through GoDaddy. Your web designer can do that. So it is a useful service, but I would not recommend doing that through GoDaddy or your provider. They'll also offer you all sorts of rafts of hosting and other bits and pieces. I personally wouldn't go for that. That's not because they don't provide great service, but I think you can get what you need elsewhere that is better, more appropriate for you and me, we kind of guys, and will probably be a little bit cheaper. There is one exception, however. They will offer you something called domain privacy. Now, if you don't care that everybody knows who you are and can find your home address, then you don't need to buy that option either. And again, it's not very expensive. But I would suggest that you put domain privacy onto your website domain, because it does mean that anybody anywhere can actually look up on the records and see who owns that domain. Now, it might not be an issue for you, but I would suggest you go with that. The thing to bear in mind is if you don't go with domain privacy today, you can go with domain privacy tomorrow, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't say that it was private prior to that. So the moment you buy this domain, if you don't have domain privacy on there, your name will be out in the public domain. It's just something to bear in mind. It probably doesn't matter at all, but it's just a watchword in terms of your personal security in these days. So I hope that makes sense. Buy domain privacy. If you have to go back to it later, your name will still show for the previous period of time before the domain privacy. So I hope that makes sense, because I've obviously whiffled on a bit now. So those are the things that I would buy from GoDaddy. Head on out to checkout. You just need your credit card and your details, and it's an incredibly simple process. And you then own that domain name. So you actually have a name for your website. Let's hope that it's the one that you want, and it's going to be a fortune, and it's going to take off, and it's going to be amazing. What you need now, of course, is the actual website. So you're going to have to approach web designers. You could do this yourself, but unless you are really, really good on the web and you can, you've got all your HTML and everything else sorted, I would suggest that you head over to find a professional. Now, the first thing that I would do with this is I would actually look and find people in your area, so other sock manufacturers perhaps, or websites that you really, really admire and really like in terms of their functionality that might work in selling your product or service. So find 2 or 3, 4 or 5 websites that you really, really like that would be able to sell your product, be able to sell your service. It looks good, it has the functionality. And then start to approach some web designers. There are tons of web designers out there. I would suggest that you ask friends or family or other people that you know that are in business. Worst case, I would suggest you go to a social media site like LinkedIn, a professional business site, and you'll get lots of web designers on there. Of course, you can just put web designers into Google. Web designers for smelly sock companies, and you will get a whole raft of web designers. The challenge you have if you're going with someone you don't know or who hasn't been recommended is it's a little bit nebulous. They may be fantastic, I'm sure most of them are, but if you are a novice, they will know that, and I don't want you to get caught out. So go and find a web designer that is recommended or that you've done some due diligence on. Now, don't just find one, I would suggest at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 web designers that you think you could work with. I don't know what your criteria are. They may need to be a local, or they may need to have a specialist skill in sock manufacturing, but find those guys. So what you then do is you approach these guys and you show them, you send to them the websites that you've looked up that you really, really like, that you want your website to look like. And you say, guys, can you do something like this? You know, this one, that one, these put together. Or I like this feature on this one, I like this feature on this one, I like the way this one looks. And get them to come back to you with yes they can and how they would do it. Okay, so that's the first thing. The next part of the process is obviously that will potentially narrow down who you can and can't work with depending on what they come back with, whether they can do the website that you're looking for. The next part of the process is then ask them to provide to you examples of sites that look like the ones you have just identified, or the bits of the sites that you've just identified. So you say that you want a call to action and you need a shipping cart on there in a particular way. Get them to send to you websites that they have designed that have those features and services. And ideally, if you can, talk to that particular client of theirs. That may not always be possible, but get them to send you examples of their work that match the criteria you've identified you want on your website. And if you can, go and talk to that particular client. So that's the process so far. Find websites that you like, find several web designers, ask them if they can do those kind of websites, get them to send you examples of those websites, and ideally talk to their clients. So what you have now is you've got your domain name and you have got your website designer and you know kind of what it's going to look like. You will then need to send to them all of your text and all of your images. Now this is the big danger area, because everything suddenly starts to escalate. So you need to be as sure as you possibly can that your text and your images are the ones that you want. Because if you start to make changes, this is where the costs and the timescales ramp up. And particularly if you are a novice in this area, again, they will know this and they'll want to be helpful. I'm not suggesting they're trying to rip you off, but they'll want to be really helpful and say, maybe you want to do it this way, maybe you want to do it that way, based on their experience. And you're going to go, oh yes, it's bright, it's shiny, it's fantastic, I want one of those. The problem with that is that will have a cost associated with it and it will escalate like the billy-o. It's going to go stratospheric in terms of timescales and costs. So be very careful. Select the images you want and get your text and get them to build that website. I'm going to talk about other bits in just a moment. If you then want to change it, do it once the website is complete under a separate project. Don't keep adding and changing photos and texts and calls to action and I want the shipping cart here and I want the menu bar down the bottom. Don't do that. Build the website even though you've suddenly realised you want all sorts of other things, and then create a new project to go and amend the website, because otherwise it will cost you a fortune. And I just wanted to mention a really big no-no. I don't care if you've got teenage kids who can change the universe on a laptop. They can stop Will Smith invading. I don't care how competent they are in all sorts of computer skills. The big no-no is you will see loads of ads from people like Wix and GoDaddy and others saying build your own website. And yes, you can. But don't. It's an absolute screaming nightmare. I don't care what your computer skills are. If you're not in that business, it's going to cause you an awful lot of cost and time and nightmare, and you will be bored by the end of the process. So I admire those companies for lots of things, but don't try and build your own website, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please just don't. So go and find a professional web designer. They have web designers out there with a range of prices and a range of services. You can dip your toe in the water. It's a much more sensible idea. I think you got the idea how vehement I am about this, so just don't. All right? No. Okay, you've now got your lovely web designer. You've selected him from all the people that you spoke to, and you're pretty confident. And you've agreed a price and a timescale based on the criteria you've been looking at. Okay, he's now, or she, or they, are going to talk to you about something called themes. A theme is a template. It's what most websites are built upon. There are hundreds of thousands of different themes. So when you go and look on the web and you look at some of your favourite websites, you will see that there are basic ways of structuring something. The menu bar is at the side, the menu bar is at the top. There are blocks of pictures here and blocks of text here. Or there are different images down here, and you'll start to see themes. They're all based on a kind of template. And your web designer is going to start talking to you about themes. These are these templates. Now, what you want to avoid is something called WordPress.com. Now, most websites are based on WordPress templates, and WordPress templates are good. WordPress.com is not for what you are doing. WordPress.com is designed for bloggers. So if you're doing blogs and you're putting blogs out there, it's a really good template for you to use, and that's cool. The challenge that you will have if you have a WordPress.com website, which you can build and may look really cool, is that it's not really designed to sell stuff, whether that's a product or a service. So it's not actually designed. So you can force it and it will look great, and if it's a very static site, okay, but it's not really designed to sell things. The other challenge that you will have is once that site is built, it's pretty fixed. You can't really upgrade it or change it in any way. So what you don't want to do is fall down this trap and the designer says, well, I can do you a really nice, cost-effective, in the right timescale website based on WordPress.com themes. What you have to say there is no, thank you very much. So what you do need, well, what you're likely to get, because most of the websites are designed by WordPress, is wordpress.org. .com, bad for you, .org, good. It's you have hundreds of themes to choose from, and it's a very, very flexible system. So it will mean that when you grow, it will grow with you. You can add all sorts of functionality, all sorts of changes into the website. So you want a theme based on wordpress.org. Now this is important as well for something called plugins. A plugin is an upgrade to a website that you might want to do later on. So let's give you a really good example. First let me tell you what a plugin is. It's things like putting a shopping cart on there. It's things like putting translator on there. It's something that is an addition to the functionality of the website. So you buy a car, the car will drive perfectly well. So your website is the car, it drives perfectly well, it's perfectly great. But you want to put a boombox stereo in there. It doesn't actually affect how well the website works, but it's personal to you. That's a plugin. You want to put rims on this car, doesn't affect how the car works. It's a personal bit of kit that you're adding to the car, and that's what a plugin is. It's something that you want to add into your website that increases the functionality that allows you to do the stuff that you need to do with the website. And WordPress.org will allow you to add all sorts of plugins, so it will be able to increase its functionality for you over a period of time. So your web designer, make sure you're going to use a WordPress.org template. So by now you should have your domain name and your website pretty much set up. It's how it wants to be. Even if it's the first pass, it looks pretty good and it will allow people to understand what you do. A website today is not actually an investment, it's a necessity, but you need to make it as good and appropriate as you possibly can, because it's the first port of call most people will see explaining about who you are and what you do. Because even if you're going to use social media, and I'm coming on to this because this is a social media business, you're going to drive them to the website. That's where they're going to buy, or that's where they're going to take action. That's what you want them to do. In 99.9% of cases today, it's your storefront. So I would suggest strongly that you invest time and effort and resource and money in building a really cool website. You can change it, you're going to move forward, it's going to be an amazing success, but your website's a huge part of the business. So what I want to touch on now is hosting. So you've got this fantastic website, you need to display it somewhere. You can't just have a website in a box in a corner. People need to be able to find it. So it needs to be hosted by somebody. Now there are, again, millions of hosting companies. There are lots of guys out there who will host your website for you. Basically, they just, they put it on their server and people have access to it. They can see it. I'll be honest with you, for my hosting, and I've got sort of 5 or 6 or 7 websites, I use GoDaddy and I use HostGator. They are cool for me. I use them because I have unlimited capacity, because I do ebb and change with the sites that I use in my other business. You guys probably don't need that. What I would say is, by all means, investigate other providers. If you find cheap hosting, it's usually cheap for a reason. So again, make sure that you understand what the level of service is that you're going to get from your hosting supplier. You need to know when you can have access to them, if there's any penalties, any taxes, etc. You have to buy 3 years in advance. Can you buy 1 year now? Etc. So go have a look. My experience has been that if it's cheap for a reason. We're not talking vast amounts of money here. We're talking about 30 odd pounds. I would go a little bit more expensive than somebody offers $5.99 in a box, because that makes me slightly worried. And as I said earlier, I've never had a problem with HostGator or GoDaddy. Prior to using them, I have hosted with other people and the sites have gone down intermittently, always at the peak selling time, of course. So that's my advice. If you want more information, then get in touch. I'll be very happy to chat through those with you. Don't know about you, but I'm starting to need a coffee, so I'm going to make this section quite brief because you need to know about it, but I think I'll do a separate video all about search engine optimization, SEO. So before I go and grab my coffee and my biscuits, let's talk a little bit about SEO. I sound like some kind of boy band at this point. Right, search engine optimization. If you want Google to find your website, you will need to optimize it for the words and phrases that your customers will use. So let's just put that in a box for the minute. Not every website needs to be optimized. If you are going to be driving customers to your website through social media and you've got huge social media platforms, you probably don't need, depending on what it is, you probably don't need to optimize your website. Or alternatively, you can do Google Ads, you can do Google AdWords, and that means that your website will be at the top based on the advertising words that you choose. So smelly socks or sweet smelling socks or whatever it happens to be, you put those words into Google and you create an ad based on that, and when anybody puts in sweet smelling socks, smelly socks, they'll find it through the ad. So you might not need to optimize your site at all. Or alternatively, you may not do business through your website, it is simply your storefront. So if people know your name, know your website name, they're going to find it. But if you want somebody who doesn't know your website name but needs your product to find you, then you're going to have to optimize your site with SEO. So let me get that really clear. If you put your website name into the internet, you will find your website. Shock. If I want to buy your product but don't know your website name, if it is not search engine optimized, I won't find it, because your website has to have some of the words in there that I will use as a customer to search. Okay, I'm just going to say that again. I want to buy smelly socks, but if your website doesn't have lots of smelly sock references in it, I may never find it, because Google doesn't know what I'm typing in and what you do match. So it's about making a match with what Google says your website does and what I'm searching for. It's nothing more complicated than that. Now, there are 2 kinds of search engine optimization: on page and off page. On page is really quite simple. It's about the words your customers will use. So you know when I said early on you need to watch all of this video, this is one of the reasons why. You need to identify the kind of words and phrases your clients and customers will use to find your product and service. And the reason I sort of mentioned you need to watch to the end, if you can do this really early on even, it will help you in identifying your website name. So smellysocks.com isn't a bad one because it is what you do. But identifying the kind of keywords that your clients will be using will really help you with that part of the process. So let's talk about the on-page portion of your search engine optimization. You will need to put in there some keywords and phrases that your clients will use to find you. They need to match as much as possible the search terms that you use. So that's not too difficult if you really know your marketplace. Now there is something you can do that will make it a little bit simpler for you. So in your new spanking brand fantastic new website, you will have something called Yoast. It's got a big Y, it's hidden in the background, you won't see it if you just view the website. If you or your web designer log in to the admin on the website, you will find the Yoast plugin. Now what Yoast will allow you to do is to put in words, smelly socks for example, and it will tell you the key phrases that people use, keywords that people use to search for that kind of product and service. Now you can't break the website, don't worry about it. If you want to log in and have a look, it's your website, or maybe get your web designer to do it. So identify the kind of words and phrases that you think your clients will be using. Either you or your web designer log in and then put these into Yoast, and it will tell you the kind of key phrases that need to be on the page of your website for your clients to find you. That's the first kind of search engine optimization. So having found through Yoast all of the key phrases, what you then need to do is to go back into your text and change your text accordingly to represent these key phrases and keywords that your clients will be looking for that Yoast has informed you about. So that will mean that Google will be able to find your page based on what your clients are looking for. So that's really simple. It's a bit of a time-consuming process, but it's relatively easy to do. And you and your web designer can do that after you've built the website. The other kind of search engine optimization is the off-page search engine optimization, SEO. And this is where other people link to your site. Okay, so let me give you an example. It needs to be one of those hyperlinks, so where somebody actually clicks through a link that takes you directly to a page or to the main page on your website. So if you have a blog, for example, okay, and you put it out there on Twitter or on Facebook, and that blog links to your website, that's a link. That's what we call a link. So that's off-page search engine optimization. And the aim of off-page is to get as many good links from good sources as possible. So there are places that you can advertise products and services, and you would automatically put a hyperlink in there. There are directories and that kind of thing that do this depending on your marketplace, and putting that hyperlink in means that other people connect through onto the website, and that will help Google find you. Now these links are like everything. There are good ones and there are bad ones and there are fantastic ones. So if you find a way, for example, of getting, I don't know, an article about smelly socks and smellysocks.com in the New York Times with a hyperlink, then that's going to be fantastic. So yeah, try and get the editor to put a hyperlink onto New York Times, but you get the idea. That's going to be a fantastic way of helping your search engine optimization, of helping other people find you, because the more of those links you have, the stronger your site will appear to Google. And last but not least, in terms of SEO, because we can talk about this in a different video, is I also want to mention your hashtags and the links from social media. So going into social media and making sure that all of those links link back, those hyperlinks and the hashtags and everything link back to your site, is a great thing to do so that Google can find you. So all search engine optimization is making sure that Google, which isn't as bad as everybody thinks it is, knows exactly what you do. And when somebody who looks for your product and service puts into Google the same kind of things, it can go, aha, I have one of those, they must want one of these, and connect the two together. So the better the connection, the better the words and the phrases and the links are, the more likely it is the clients that you're looking for will find your web page. Now, this is an organic process and this will build over time. And as I say, I'm going to do a completely separate video on this because I aren't actually SEOing my website at the moment either, but it is worth knowing. But there are other ways of driving traffic to your website and making people look at the website, like ads and your social media. So don't panic. Another video coming, but I hope you've enjoyed this one. So all that is left for me to say is, because I'm getting my life a bit more organised in terms of how I deal with Brainy Biscuit, because it's all new to me. So all I need to say now is please like this video. I hope it's been really useful. If you've got any questions or queries, or you think I can help you in any way, please put a comment below, because I will happily come back to you. This is a voyage of exploration for me. So do like it and do subscribe. I'm building my website, so I'm going to say, it's not there yet, but I'm going to say by the time you guys see this, head on over to brainybiscuit.com, she said with her fingers crossed at this point. And also then there is my Instagram, which is the Brainy Biscuit, and Facebook, which is the Brainy Biscuit. So I'm hoping by the time you guys see this, all of this is set up. But certainly in terms of this video, please like it, please subscribe, and do get in touch if this has been useful, because it's something that I'm quite passionate about, because I think that people get scared of this kind of stuff, and they absolutely shouldn't be. So all it is left for me to say is, I suppose, bye now.